Good morning from the Woodstock Chamber of Commerce. We're happy to host this educational workshop to help share the importance of understanding the impact of mental health on the workplace, and to help share some incredible perspective and some insights is our good friend Laura Glennie from Journeywell Health and Wellness. Laura has been to a number of our events, so if you've been to a Business After Five, you've likely met Laura before. Laura and her team do incredible work to help support mental health needs in individuals and groups in our community. Good morning, Laura.
Morning. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to share some of this information. I talk with lots of folks one-on-one, and being able to do it in a group setting and share different perspectives is good. I'm hoping that we can do a little bit of engagement this morning, just with some polls and perhaps putting some answers into chat. So I'm hoping that folks will participate in some of those. It gives us information, but also shares with your colleagues around this table. So. I'm a registered psychotherapist and a registered marriage and family therapist, licensed in the province of Ontario to provide psychotherapy and counseling. But I also do some consulting work, both for organizations and for other counseling teams. So there's lots of different perspectives, but I've worked in agency work and I'm self-employed now. I own the practice, Journeywell Health and Wellness. We have 9 therapists and a naturopathic doctor supporting folks on their wellness journeys. But I also believe very strongly that I know I am not everyone's cup of tea. So not every person is going to fit with me specifically. And if it's not a fit with our team, my focus is really on making sure that we get people connected to the right people at the right time. So if that's not me, I want to help folks navigate a what can be a complicated and complex system. And when we don't know where to go with something as vulnerable and still having the stigma that does around mental health, I really want to make sure that people know that I can be a resource if you have questions at all, even if it's not to do anything business related. You just need resources or information. Please don't hesitate to reach out to me. I've got my contact information at the end, but you can always reach out to me or to Mike if you need to get a hold of me. I give Mike carte blanche to share my contact information with people if they need it. So we will jump in. If at any time you have any questions, please do the whole raise hand thing or put it in the comments. Mike's going to keep an eye on the comments for me. Just if people do put questions, I'm happy to answer them as we go, but I've got some time allotted at the end for questions as well if you've got anything that you um, want to ask then. Okay. Um, so we're going to do some techie stuff and see if I can get this to work. Give me a moment. And so since I can't see folks, I'm going to ask Mike, can you just nod if you can see that all right?
Looks
Good.
great.
Okay. All righty. So we are here to talk about building a mentally healthy workplace. Work and mental health definitely overlap, but mental health definitely is within the entirety of our lives, with workplace being kind of part of that. So a lot of the things that I'm going to talk about today um, really cover all the bases. You're going to be able to use some of this in personal relationships, but be able to implement stuff in the workplace as well. And then I've got a little bit in the workplace piece just for expectations. I am not a legal consultant or a health and safety consultant. So if there are pieces within your workplace that you need legal opinion or it is a health and safety piece, I don't necessarily have that lens. So just to make sure that we know kind of where my lane in this is. So we're going to talk about how do we understand mental health? How do we assess mental health concerns? I'm not asking you to do those assessments, but we just need to be conscious of and aware. And then how do we talk about it? How do we communicate about mental health? And how do we take care of ourselves and others? I've got some resources, and then there'll be some time for questions. So we are going to start with a poll question. Mike, if you could do um, the first one there, I am here today. If you can just real quick, just so that I have a sense of who is around in our presentation today. Sometimes we can give different examples based on the context that folks are coming from.
Okay, the answers are rolling in. We'll give it another 10 seconds. Perfect. Can you see those results, Laura? Laura? Oh, my, sorry. I need another sip of coffee. Excuse me.
Monday. It's all good. Okay, so we've got some employers, we've got some employees, we've got managers, leaders. So it just gives us a sense of kind of the lens and scope that folks are coming from. So I really appreciate you sharing that piece. Um, and we're just going to kind of keep track of some of these pieces so we can pull this together. I'm hoping to send out something after the fact to the folks that are participating today, just with some of the resources. So at the end, I've got a couple of slides that have resources on them. You don't have to frantically write them down. I'm happy to share the slide deck. I'm happy to share a listing of resources, but that just helps me to know kind of who is here today. And so there is another question that I was hoping Mike could ask in the poll, just asking about how confident folks are in their knowledge of mental health. Again, knowing where people are coming at this conversation from today will help me to tailor things a little bit more. Okay, so we've got a range of folks with knowledge and information. Um, I would have expected that range, right? People come at us, come at these things from very different places and different life experiences, different trainings, and things like that. So if you're sitting in a place of kind of not at all or a little, we've got some information, the somewhat vary. We've got some different perspectives that might not be how you've thought of things before, or help bring in some different ideas and suggestions. So as always, if there are ever questions about anything, please do let me know, and we'll see kind of how we can support folks with the context that they're coming from. Alrighty. So then, where do we go from here? How do we understand mental health? So when we think about what is mental health, if you feel comfortable enough, could I get you to put in the chat, the comments, what is mental health? What's your perspective of what mental health is? Mike, I can't see those comments with this running, so just you don't have to tell me who or what, but just like what are some themes of what folks are saying?
Of course. And I will also add, if anyone, maybe you're shy and you're like, oh,
Have to.
I don't want to look silly. You can send it directly to me and I won't share who said it. I'll just share the statement. One person shares emotional and social well-being, sociological
Mhm.
or psychological. Any others? Here we go. An overall feeling of being able to cope with the day-to-day challenges of life, feeling comfortable in your skin in most situations.
Mhm. Yeah.
Any last perspectives people want to share? These are great. If we get any more, Laura, I'll let you know.
Sounds good. So all of those definitely apply to what is mental health. And so when we look at mental health, emotional, psychological, social well-being, it influences how we think, how we act, how we feel, how we handle stress, how we make choices. I might make choices differently if I am feeling really stressed versus if I'm having a really great day, right? Those choices might look differently, and how we relate to others. So when we think about in the workplace, what decisions are we making? What choices are we making? How are we relating to colleagues, whether that is peers or whether those are employees, whether those are managers, folks above us on that hierarchy? It's a state of well being that allows us to cope with those stressors, realize our abilities, whether we have the confidence to do what we want to do or need to do, how we learn. We don't learn well when we are stressed, if our mental health is not doing well, so you may have folks in the office or in your location that it seems like they just can't pick something up. Could it be because of stress? Could it be because of heightened emotional activity? Um, it affects how we work and then how we contribute to the community. So when we think of that, we then look at mental health versus mental illness. So up until the last, couple of decades, um, more so it's been changing more recently, is this idea of mental illness versus mental health. Initially, anything to do with mental health, if it wasn't kind of in that normal range, it was considered illness, where we're starting to now look at it more as a spectrum where I'm similar to physical health. I might see myself as really physically well, physically healthy, or I might be like, well, I don't do so great. Maybe I'm not eating the way I should. I don't move as much as I should. It doesn't mean I'm not healthy, but it might just be an impact, right? I know for myself, I have two kids. When I'm exercising more, I can keep up with my kids much better, right? So just those small pieces. And so being conscious of mental health as a spectrum and overall kind of how we think, how we act, how we feel, versus mental illness. When we get into things that are more diagnosable, things that are impacting our day to day, getting in the way of our functioning, that's where we start to say something with our mental health is creating a challenge for us. There's things like anxiety, depression, if there are other diagnosable pieces, different mood disorders, that kind of thing. And so then we also have those persisting stigmas and dominant discourse. So when we think about mental health, is it something that we feel really comfortable around? Is it something that is more um, oh, this is bad, this isn't okay. I find lots of folks that I talk to will talk about, oh yeah, I have lots of kindness and compassion for someone else's concerns in this context, but perhaps less in that context. But then also, how do we see our own mental health? We are tend to be our own worst critics, and I have lots of folks that will talk about, oh well, it's okay that that person is experiencing that, but is it okay for me to be experiencing that? um, and the dominant discourse being the narrative within our communities, within our society, about what mental health means, what it means if someone is struggling with mental health, what the story is about how we could or should respond to folks who might be experiencing mental health challenges, whether that is stressors, whether that's a diagnosis, whether that's something contextual, circumstantial right now, or whether it's something ongoing. So there's lots of stories out there about what mental health is, whether it's okay, not okay. There's lots of judgments and stigmas are still, even though the narrative and the conversations are changing. Um, how can we understand what this is, and how can we start to make some positive change that will allow us to attend to this more effectively? Persisting those stigmas, leaning into those dominant discourses that suggest there is a judgment around mental health, hasn't necessarily been getting us the outcomes that we would like to see. And I do challenge folks to consider, how do I want to have my own mental health managed or dealt with? How do I want others to respond to me? But how do I know that others might need that might not fit within what I understand? What someone else needs might not be what I need, um, but that doesn't mean that it's not okay for them to need that. So there's lots of different ways to look at this. So when we think about kind of what is mental health, um, one of the questions I wanted to check and see, once we've got this idea of emotional, so psychological, social well-being, think, act, feel, how we make choices, I'd ask folks to add in the comments, if you feel comfortable doing so, how does mental health show up in your workplace right now? What are you noticing about how mental health is showing up?
If anyone has anything they'd like to share again and not comfortable putting it in the overall chat, send it directly to me, please. Um, Thankfully, it is no longer a taboo topic in one workplace. It can show up as absence or illness as an
Mhm.
effect from it.
Mhm.
Some great perspective.
Absolutely.
Any other thoughts? We have people more openly discussing how they are really doing. Oh, we got all sorts coming through now. This is lovely. Could show up in mood. Another person says the pandemic was very stressful and people are still recovering from that. Now we have threats of economic war from Trump and the threat of our country's sovereignty. Uh, Openness to sharing if we are stressed and talk with each other to find out how we can help. It could affect work quality. Um, and when people are have the ability to be more open about it, it lets us do something sooner, either
Mhm.
show support or find resources. These are some great perspective, folks.
They are. Yeah. Okay. So thank you for sharing. I appreciate those pieces. One of the things that I believe strongly in is uh, working better together, right? Rather than working smarter, not harder together. So that when you share some of those information and perspectives, you see a little bit about what colleagues might be dealing with, right, in their workplaces, and some different ideas and perspectives. And that sharing can really give us some great ideas for moving things forward. And so then we move on to how do we assess mental health concerns, and not from a doctor perspective. Um, but, how do I just know what might be when it might be mental health, or what we might need to do about that? So, I have a couple of poll questions that I wanted to ask folks with this one. Um, one being, how confident are you in identifying mental health concerns for yourself? Um, these polls are confidential. It doesn't show us necessarily kind of who is answering those. So if you are feeling okay to answer that, please go ahead. Um, but how confident are you in identifying your own? That's one level of skill in terms of being able to assess kind of mental health concerns. Do I recognize those things in myself? Okay. So we've got some lots of somewhat, a couple very, some a little. The not at all is hard. So I'm glad that folks are definitely have at least a little bit and somewhat. The other question that I wanted to ask folks was around how confident are you in recognizing mental health concerns in others? Okay. So similar, perhaps a little bit less confidence in managing, or at least kind of assessing or recognizing when other folks might be having mental health concerns. And I think that's a really great distinction, because we can't read people's minds. And I tell people all the time when I'm working with folks, I try really hard to be attuned with clients. But at the end of the day, even if I'm reading body language, even if I'm kind of listening to words, I can't read their minds, and we need that conversation to happen. Um, and so then, how do we know? Um, Hold on a second. There we go. So, how do we know that I might need support or someone around me might need support? Some of that can be that self reflection. Are we in tune enough with ourselves? Are we in tune enough with others around us to kind of recognize when someone might be struggling with something? Others might share with us. They might share with us, hey, I noticed this about someone else. I noticed this about my colleague, or I noticed this about you, right? We have folks in our lives that might be concerned about us. So we might hear it from other folks. And then we have mental health professionals who can do the formal assessment. Um, the system is a little bit challenging. There's lots of different terminology for folks who might do some of that work. So I'm a registered psychotherapist. I do not diagnose. Registered psychotherapy cannot diagnose, and we cannot prescribe medication, but we can do treatment. I have lots of folks that will come with a diagnosis, or they will come talking about their symptoms, and we can treat their symptoms in the absence of a formal diagnosis. A psychologist is someone who has completed their doctorate in clinical psychology. They are able to use licensed assessments and make diagnoses, but psychologists are not able to prescribe medication. A medical doctor is someone who has gone to med school. Often GPs will, general practitioners, will do a bit of assessment, but may decide they want to refer you on to a psychiatrist in order to get a more formal diagnosis. Medical doctors obviously can prescribe medication and they can diagnose. A psychiatrist is a medical doctor who has gone on and done their residency in psychiatry. So they've done a 5-year residency over and above med school around how to assess, diagnose, and treat mental health concerns, and they can prescribe medication. So we want folks to know, if I'm needing some supports, where do I go? Who do I talk to from that kind of formal perspective? Those would be your folks. Registered social workers and registered psychotherapists essentially do the same work. Can't diagnose, can't prescribe medication, but we do the treatment piece. And then psychologists, medical doctors, and psychiatrists. So those are your formal pathways of how we assess. Your more informal pathways is simply being able to recognize what are some of the signs and symptoms. And some of those came out in the comments earlier. Mike, you had mentioned some folks were talking about absences, right? If people are absent from work a lot more, what does that mean? If you've known someone for a little while and gotten to know them, you don't have to know them super well, but you might get a sense of kind of how they operate. If things are starting to happen that are out of what you know to be the norm, those could be signs and symptoms that there's something going on. Maybe they've always been on time for work and now they're not. Maybe they were fairly chatty, fairly positive, fairly upbeat, but you're noticing that they're a bit more withdrawn. Right? Those are some of the things. There are some more obvious ones, perhaps, if we look at more of the extreme end of things, maybe they are having outbursts at work, whereas before they weren't. Some of those outward signs and symptoms, right? If you hear folks complaining about things like, oh, is it hot in here? Sometimes hot can be a symptom of anxiety if someone's kind of there, or stress, right? That it's getting, so it might not be the actual temperature. It could be something physiological that's happening for them within the context of mental health concerns. We're not going to be able to see all of the signs and symptoms. So if someone's breathing changes, you might notice that they're breathing heavy or breathing rapidly, but you might not. Heart rate changes, you're not going to know that. So we want to make a distinction between the signs and symptoms that people will be experiencing. If they're reporting some of these things, we can know that those are pieces that we just flag as, are these something that could be a mental health piece? Other signs and symptoms could be, does their pace of speech change? If someone is speaking rather quickly, is that the norm for them? In the absence of doing some of those formal assessments, that's the piece, is what is this different than what you know for them? If it's someone who you haven't known for very long, you might not have that indication. You might not know if that's kind of typical for them or not. So keeping an eye on some of those pieces. One of the things that I will put in the document that I send will be some of those signs and symptoms a bit more concretely, so that you have that kind of, not a checklist, but a bit of a just information, right? So that you know what those things are we might look for. One of the kind of other ends of that spectrum, from kind of wellness to concern, would be burnout. In the workplace, burnout is something that initially was identified as just being in the workplace. I might argue that it could be experienced in our personal lives as well. If we're caretakers or there's a lot of demands on us outside, folks that are dealing with ongoing financial stressors, right? That ongoing stress is what creates that burnout. And so burnout is considered a state of emotional, physical, or mental exhaustion caused by prolonged or excessive stress. Often it's characterized by feelings of depletion, that people are feeling depleted, exhausted by the things going on around them. Cynicism is another piece that really is a key characteristic of burnout, and reduced effectiveness. We might be go, 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 but if we're feeling burnt out, we don't have the energy, we don't have the get up and go, if you will, to be able to be as effective as we might have been. Um, The challenge with burnout is that we live in a society that really prioritizes and rewards busyness and productivity. And people push and push and push and push. I don't know anyone that's like that. The going all the time, we end up feeling exhausted. But our society also does not necessarily reward rest in order to bring ourselves back up to what is our needed level, um, to be feel mentally well. So in a society that prioritizes and rewards busyness and productivity, it also then lends to what does that mean about our value and worth as a person, which is a bit challenging. That in the workplace, if I need to be successful, we need to be doing our work. But if I am overextending myself, whether that's in the workplace or at home in my personal life, if I'm overextending myself, I can't be as effective. I'm not resting. I'm not doing what I need to do to recharge. And it's a hard balancing act. Um, and so we will talk about kind of the balance piece. Um, but it is really hard to find sometimes, how do I be as productive as I can without burning myself out? Right? Um, which then speaks to capacity. So it's important everywhere how much capacity we have. Capacity being how much do I have to give? How much can I put into this? Whether that's you as a manager, whether that's you as an employee, um, how much can I give to this? And again, that need to be productive, need to be busy. We need to get the things done. The to-do list for lots of us never ends, right? And yet, how much capacity do I have to actually attend to those things and attend to them well? So, how much can we put on ourselves and how much can we put on others? Are our expectations about our capacity and about our employees' capacity accurate? So, one of the models that we look at is called the stress diathesis model. This is not a glass half empty, half full kind of analogy. So, we look at what we call predisposing factors. Predisposing factors are things like adverse childhood experiences, ACEs. Was there childhood trauma? Could be chronic illness, um, things that we've got kind of going on all the time. Could be some genetic or biological pieces. So these predisposing factors fill our cup. And so you'll see there's a little bit of white left on both of those cups. You know people in your life who have fuller cups, less capacity, not as full cups, more capacity. The other piece that we look at is precipitating factors. So these are the things like, we got a bill that we weren't expecting. And so there's this new stressor that's current right now in this moment. COVID was a precipitating factor, something that was happening right now in this moment that adds to or takes away from the capacity that we have, rather. So could be kiddos, could be work stuff, could be school stuff, could be whatever the case may be. But these are things that are current, kind of right now, contextual factors. The white space at the top is how much capacity I have left. The cup on the left that is fuller shows that person maybe has a little bit less capacity for new stuff. The cup on the right, that person may have a bit more capacity for new stuff to be added. And so when we pour water in, this is what I have left to manage my day to day, what I have left to manage things that might come at me. And this is different for everybody. You might have employees in your location that, can just keep going and take on, and others who we can only do one thing at a time, or um, just operate differently, right? They have a different approach to things and different capacity for how much they can take on in a given moment. Um, and so it just helps us to consider, how do I assess my own capacity? What have I got left for this? And how do I consider the capacity of the folks around me that are participating in this? And our capacity might be different every day. I might have capacity one day for lots of things, and I'm really productive and I get lots done. My capacity on another day, I have a kiddo that's up in the night lots still, right? On those days when she's up in the night, my capacity is left. I'm tired, right, from a not a great night's sleep. So it's important to consider those contextual factors. Um, Another one is called spoon theory. I don't know if folks have heard this one. Spoon theory comes more from the kind of disability, chronic illness realm. Christine Miserandino, who had lupus, developed this model 20 some odd years ago when she was trying to explain her experience with lupus. And so, folks who have chronic illness, chronic pain, disability, which can include mental health concerns, anxiety, depression, PTSD, as those can become, quite a struggle on the day to day. This is really about limited energy resources. So, for some, everyday tasks take more energy, or spoons, if you will, in order to do things that they might need to do. So, folks may need to ration their spoons. What do I do? How much energy do I have to do these different things? And if I only have so many in a day, I need to decide very carefully, where am I going to expend the energy? Where am I going to expend the capacity that I have today? And making those choices about what they can and can't do. Um, and so then sleep and self-care is about restoring the number of spoons you have for the next day. And so in this example here, right, if every day has 12 spoons, these are some examples of things that you might do. Going to work might take 4, so I might have 8 left for doing other things. Um, for some folks, socializing, being around people takes a lot, because it can be mentally exhausting, things like that. So everybody's allotment of energy and time is going to be different. And so, how do we leave space for and understand that difference? Do those pieces make sense? Those ideas around those cups, the capacity that we have, and this idea of spoons? Does that make sense? Do we have any questions at this point?
If you do have a question, please throw it in the chat. I think that this makes really great sense. I love a good analogy, and to see this laid out like this, I think is really interesting. And I also think too, certain things might cost different spoons each day too, in a way, right? Like socializing for me, that sometimes that charges my battery in a way, and it makes me feel better. And other times, that's a 4 spoon day just right there from that. So it's interesting how just depending on our energy levels and stuff, it might vary as well too. Somebody shared that the spoon theory is new to them, and they say thank you for sharing.
Welcome. It's a tangible way to understand something that is sometimes not tangible, right? We can't see someone's energy levels necessarily. Similar, we can't read their minds. And so having something tangible to be able to, like, you have, I would imagine everyone has a cutlery drawer at home, right? And so you can see, well, we've got this many spoons, or, maybe we didn't get the dishes done last night, so there are no spoons for breakfast, right? It gives a nice tangible way to think about people's energies, their limited resource around energy, and how to understand that for folks. Um,
I'll
all
also
right.
share. Somebody shared it would be helpful if the employees understood which type of job behaviors are best for them, as it is hard for employers to understand before hiring. Also, it's easy to go over your allotment of spoons for the day and be drained for the next day because of it.
Yes. Yeah. Do we borrow spoons from the next day? Right? Which is what we often hear from our folks with chronic illness when we talk about this analogy, right? Is we borrow from the next day in order to complete the day, and then we end up in this chronic fatigue. place, right? And never being able to catch up. Um, and I appreciate the comment about if employees understood their own limitations, right? We're asking folks to understand in the workplace if they understood those tasks and how much energy they took for them, if we could also then be upfront and communicate that, which is kind of where we're headed next, is about communication, how we talk about some of these things. And so, Mike, we have another poll that I wanted to just check and see. Are you comfortable talking about mental health in the workplace? Yeah. So lots of folks that feel they are, some that aren't comfortable, and that's okay. It's a hard topic sometimes. It's hard to be vulnerable. It's hard to share. And some folks that are kind of right. It sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. Um, it's definitely shifting, but we are still definitely in that place where it is. It can definitely be a challenge still. So I appreciate folks sharing that piece. And so then in the chat, I know that we've talked, I heard some of this earlier about some open conversations that were happening, that things were shifting. But in the chat, I would just invite you to identify, what does communication look like in your workplace right now about
Um,
mental
well,
health
While
specifically?
people share about communication about mental health in the workplace, I'm going to share as well too. Somebody wrote in the chat, Laura, um, it is the first time I have seen the spoon theory as well. It is something I deal with my adult son who deals with autism, depression, and agoraphobia. We have had many discussions about how much some of the day-to-day things take out of him. The spoons might be a good way for me to understand what he is trying to communicate. It's very cool. Um, so in terms of communication, we communicate about it, but still need to work on our supports and how we handle it.
There. Yep.
I feel like that's probably a common perspective. Anyone else have any thoughts to share in terms of how to communicate about mental health? I try to talk to employees about it, but recognize that I'm not an expert. Somebody else shared, I went on a nationwide broadcast to share my own mental health experience. It has opened up people to reach out to this person. Wonderful.
Okay.
I'll let you know if any more pop in.
Yeah, perfect. So when we think about communication, one of the things that I think of an analogy, and I've shared this one with you, Mike, about the car in front of us. I don't know how many folks on the call this morning drive or have been a passenger in a vehicle, but I would imagine at some point that's maybe been the case. Um, at some point, there has maybe been a time when you've been following a car that is really slow. Maybe they're driving in a straight that's really slow. Maybe they're turning a corner, but it's taking a long time to get around that corner. And at some point, invariably, I would imagine, I don't want to assume this for everybody, but you can imagine, I'm sure, that you could have a driver behind that car that's going really slow that is like, oh my gosh, you're going so slow. Please, like, get out of the way, get moving. It might get a little colorful in the language towards this driver in front of you. If the car in front of you had a sticker on the back of it that said new driver, does that change your perspective of why the car in front of you is going so slow? And does it change how you respond? Right? And so the context of that is so important. We don't know what folks are what folks are dealing with kind of in their personal lives. As much as we like to have that separation, work is work, home is home, as much as we like to kind of leave that at the door, it's not always that easy. Some folks are very good at compartmentalizing, and lots aren't. And so it comes with us, that stuff that we bring, whether it's work stuff, home stuff. And so if I had the context for what I am seeing in front of me, how an employee is behaving, how a manager is treating me, how a project is going, Would I respond differently if I had more context about what is influencing that particular person's behavior? The person we're dealing with may not share that information, but I share that question as a place to position yourself from a place of curiosity. If I can hold on to that curiosity and wonder, rather than jumping to, oh my gosh, this person is insert negative judgment about their performance or how they're engaging, um, would I respond differently? Could I ask questions differently? Could I engage supports differently if I was curious and wondering, what do I not know about where this person is coming from right now? Right? And does it open up the opportunity to perhaps ask some questions? Um, Vulnerability is another piece of this that makes it hard. It's hard to share about our own mental health. It's sometimes hard to ask about mental health. Um, it is inviting folks to be vulnerable in a location where there are power dynamics. So, boss, employee, right? There's this power where this person could potentially use this in a way, that impacts my job or impacts my advancement in the workplace or impacts projects that I get put on or what have you. There's lots of different ways that that power hierarchy influences the ability to be vulnerable. And so if I don't feel safe enough, if I don't feel like I can be vulnerable, I'm not going to share with you the context that you might need to assess things differently. Does that make sense?
I'm gonna slip in here. I think context is a really big part of this. I want to share some really cool things that are being said in regards to communication. So someone shared, we started a committee called "Are You Okay?" during COVID. There was an open communication from all levels of management that it's okay not to be okay. That was a starting point for people being willing to talk more openly. Someone else shared that we have organized mental health first aid for our supervisors and managers to hopefully provide some tools in identifying and supporting mental health. And in regards to communication, somebody else shared some of us fear mishandling it, so we avoid it. That's a very probably common thing as well too. So um, yeah, so some more context in how people see the communication parts of it. Um, and then also, there's a great man on the train story that Stephen Covey tells in his book, The Seven Habits. I think that's it in that book. I try to remember that story when I am tempted to judge someone on how they are currently acting. And somebody else acknowledges the man on the train scenario as well too. This is not something I'm familiar with, but in terms of context, it certainly speaks to people.
Yeah. Well, and that's exactly why I wanted folks to be able to engage and put those comments in because there are pieces that the rest of you have. It's about collective wisdom, right? You all have pieces of this, and how do we share and grow in that together? So I really appreciate those comments and those pieces, and so hopefully we can, Mike, maybe we can add that some context for that Stephen Covey example, the man on the train, to the pieces that we're going to send out, just if there are folks that aren't familiar with that one. Yeah, awesome. Okay. Um, and so then when we talk about creating safety in order to be able to talk about this, right, there has to be openness, there has to be opportunity. It might not be the right time, but how do we identify this is important? What you're wanting to tell me is really important. In order to do it justice, could we schedule a time when we could have this conversation uninterrupted? That's very different than, well, now's not the time, right? That presentation, that openness of how can we find a time where we can do this conversation justice, showing that it's important, that it's open, that we can have these conversations, active listening. So, active listening is not just hearing what people are telling you, but it's listening attentively, seeking to understand what they're saying, responding empathically, reflecting in a meaningful way, and retaining that information for later. If we've told someone something and that was important and they've forgotten, what does that feel like? I recognize we can't remember everything someone tells us, so I don't want to put pressure on folks that that's what has to happen, but active listening is about being engaged. It's about not being on your phone or a device when someone is trying to tell you something important. It's about kind of reflecting back. Oh, it sounds like, when they're telling you about a hard thing at home, it sounds like that's been really challenging. Tell me more, or inviting that person to share. Um, Modeling vulnerability and openness in an appropriate way. So I recognize that in the workplace, we don't want to necessarily be having therapy sessions unless you're in my office. So this is about being appropriate in the workplace. Maybe sharing that I'm struggling, but it's not giving all of the details about it. Being appropriate with different relationships. Similarly, that we wouldn't might not necessarily share our whole life story with someone we're sitting next to on the bus, or the clerk at the grocery store, or right. We want it to be with folks that we're safe with. But how can we model that within our workplaces? Um, Appropriate vulnerability and openness, modeling that for folks so that they can see that you are a safe place, so that they can see what level that should be, right? That I might share, oh, it was a bit of a tough weekend. We had a situation with my family, but I'm working on it, right? It doesn't give any details, but it gives the context that maybe it was a hard weekend, and maybe I'm not on my A game today, right? So rather than going into all of the details that might not be needed. Um, Validating emotions and experiences. Have you ever had someone where you've just shared something, really heartfelt, and they're like, "Oh, well, whatever." Okay, right? Um, Being able to validate that when someone tells you something about their experience, right? I hear that that was really hard for you. Um, you don't have to necessarily, again, get into a therapy conversation, but I can validate that, wow, that sounds like it was really hard, right? The impact of our nonverbals. There is debate about how much of our communication is verbal versus the actual words we use versus nonverbals, which is facial expression, body language. They do count tone of voice in the nonverbal section. Um, there are some estimates that say it's 80%, some say it's 93%. Most will agree that it's over 50% of our communication with folks is nonverbal, which means it's not the words that we use, right? If I am looking away from someone, if I'm on a device, if I'm whatever my facial expression might look like, my body language, if I'm closed off, if I'm turned away, those are all going to impact whether the person in front of me feels that they can share what they need to share. Because our brain is always scanning our environment for safety. For folks who have anxiety, or PTSD, that is heightened significantly. That hypervigilance for safety. And so they're always scanning. Um, our brain is always scanning anyways for those safety cues. And some of those nonverbals can really impact whether or not someone feels that there is enough safety here to talk about and share the things that we might need to share. Um, Creating that safety can take a lot of time, especially if it's not been a positive experience within your workplace. It's very easy to break that down, and it's harder to build up. So it's sometimes just those small things, those small things that will help, every day being consistent in order to build up that safety for folks. It might be one relationship at a time. Um, to build that trust and openness. Righty. So then how do we take care of ourselves and others? Within the workplace, this is tricky because where are the lines? What lane am I in order to be able to do some of this? And so the approach and the mindset that we take, right, is there understanding? Is there empathy? Is there compassion? Um, Understanding being, do we perceive the meaning of kind of what the person is telling me from their perspective? Recognizing that I hold a lens, but do I have space, curiosity, Space and curiosity to hear where they're coming from. Uh, Empathy is the ability to understand, be aware of, uh, and be sensitive to what someone might be sharing with us. And then compassion is just concern for their suffering or the misfortune of others. What's important is that it's unique and individual to everybody that you work with, right? Is that one person might need this particular approach, this person might need this particular approach. I have a couple of folks that I work with that humor is huge. I have a couple of other folks who we don't use a lot of humor. Knowing your audience is really important. It's not a blanket kind of one size approach, unfortunately. Um, so then brings us to the piece I talked about balance a little bit earlier. Work-life balance. Do we feel that it's a myth? Do we feel it's reality, or is it an unattainable gold standard? There are lots of folks that are starting to suggest that this narrative of work-life balance doesn't actually exist because work exists within life. For some people, work is their life. For some people, they love their work so much that it doesn't feel like work. There are other folks who work is drudgery. Work is they don't like their job, they don't want to go to their job, but it's a means to an end. It pays the bills. Um, and so, how do we find more of a fluidity and some harmony between work and life? Because work is part of that life, right? There are too many factors um, and things out of control, variables day to day, to truly find that work-life balance. And I think it puts folks in a bit of a stress mindset where it feels like we're not achieving something that I should be attaining. And so trying to help folks find that harmony between how does my work fit within the rest of my context of my life. Um, and so then with some strategies around navigating taking care of self and others, creating that safe space. How to create a space where folks feel safe enough. And even though we might not know how to handle it, we can create a safety where we can say, you know what? I'm not sure how to respond to this right now, but I want you to know that I'm with you. I might not have all the answers, and I might not know how to handle what someone is bringing me, but can I walk with them in it? Can I be safe enough that you know what? You're not alone. I'm here, and while I don't have the answers, I can try to support you. And that could be helping them find other supports. Making conversation about mental health normal. That it's okay to talk about these things. It's okay to not be okay, but it's okay to raise these conversations, right? How are people doing? Making that a normal part of conversation on a regular basis. It doesn't mean we have to do it on a daily basis. It doesn't mean we have to sit down and have therapy sessions at work on a regular basis. But do we talk about things that we see in legislation or new health and safety things that are to do with mental health? Do we, come back to, hey, we were having conversations about this before. We should bring that back. This kind of thing. Developing your own awareness of what's going on for you, how that's playing out in the workplace, your own mental health, your own strengths, your own resources, and your own growing edges, um, so that we can respond intentionally versus reacting. If I am just going by my emotions or I'm under stress, I'm more likely to have a knee-jerk reaction to something than I am to kind of pause and think, how could I respond effectively to this? Intention versus impact is another one that when we have our own awareness of things and we're mindful, we are more likely to be able to influence the impact more effectively. My intention might be good. I might be, oh, I intended, I didn't intend to hurt someone. I didn't intend this. My intention was good. But if the impact is not, if the impact was one of harm, right? If we're more aware, we can be a bit more conscious of, okay, what's my intention here? And is it going to have the impact that I want to see? Um, and instead of but, That reframe can be really helpful. Um, you know, I am feeling exhausted today, and I'm here and willing to give what I can, right? I invite you to consider, where can I replace but with and. Consider your nonverbal cues, fostering working relationships in the workplace. And I put in working relationships because we want to make sure that it's appropriate for the context that you're in. But fostering those connections at work, right? If we have people at work that we feel we can count on, it helps build that safety. Saying no and setting boundaries, that goes for kind of everybody in, but being able to have the safety to say, you know what, I don't have the capacity for that. I don't have the ability to do that today. I understand that in the workplace, sometimes we still have to do those things. So it's a hard balance in that regard sometimes. But those are pieces that can be really helpful in creating that safety, and creating that ability to be vulnerable and share our capacity so that things are um, allocated appropriately. Setting clear expectations for yourself, for the people in your workplace, so that folks know um, what they need to be doing, but also what the expectations are around being able to talk about mental health, being able to come to folks. If there's are expectations that, you know what, I trust that you're going to come to me if there's a problem, right? Things like that. So, where can I find help? These
Laura,
are, yeah,
sorry to interrupt. I do want to say we're in our last moments here, and I know that some people might have to drop it right at 11. So I'm just going to extend the invite to anyone. If you have any questions or anything like that that you want us to help answer, please do pop them into the chat before you go. And you can always send them directly to me if you want to be discreet about it. And be sure to check out the recording after, and we'll be sure to visit that. Otherwise, we certainly invite you to join us for these last moments as we head into the end of the call. Sorry, Laura, continue.
okay. So these are options for resources. So counseling and psychotherapy. So Journeywell Health and Wellness, like I mentioned before, we have 9 therapists, but it doesn't have to be us. There are lots of other therapy, counseling and therapy folks around. Psychology Today is a great place for folks to look and find therapists in the area. Reach Out 24/7 is a crisis line. They are through CMHA. Um, so if you have folks that are in crisis, that's an option. They do phone as well as text and web-based supports. So they would be good options if you have folks that you need to send for more immediate supports. Um, Consultants, bringing consultants in to talk to your team or to work with you around, how do we do either organizational culture or build safety, or what could we be doing differently? How do we structure supervision differently, or what have you? I'm running a mindfulness workshop at the end of April. Keep an eye on our socials for that if that would be helpful. We have other resources locally. Do Good Oxford County, they run a lot of workshops that are related to mental health. Brene Brown, I love Brene Brown's work around vulnerability, creating safety. Specifically, I would draw folks' attention to the book Dare to Lead. That book was written specifically for workplaces, with ways to have different kinds of conversations, and how do we want to lead from a place of um, authenticity and vulnerability. So that's an option. And these are just some places in Canada that are helpful. The Mental Health Commission of Canada has lots of resources on their website. Mental Health Works is a Canadian website as well. Mental Health Association, Center for Addiction and Mental Health First Aid, and Safe Talk. I know Jenny Lee runs Safe Talk workshops quite often, sometimes out of our building, sometimes other locations. Mental Health First Aid is through CMHA, to my knowledge, but there's also a psychological safety one through First Class First Aid in Woodstock, if that's something that folks need. And then there's an Ontario page that talks about mental health in the workplace, which is more in line with some of those health and safety pieces. So those resources, Mike and I will send out a listing with all of those things and some of the websites that I think would be particularly pertinent to workplace pieces. And that's it. That's me. I'll stop talking now.
Yeah. Laura, that was incredibly insightful. And I think that there were some really good tidbits and opportunities to self-reflect on both our individual selves and our workplace cultures. So thank you for sharing all this. I do have a question that's come through. Um, do you have a comment on the damage or trauma that people bring to the workplace from previous experiences at different workplaces?
Mm. Time. Is the short answer. I think in order to build that trust in the new workplace, their brain is going to be primed for the same thing to happen again. So it's about having different experiences. You may not know what those experiences are, and you may not know when you're stepping on a landmine, but the repair of that will go a long ways in helping to navigate that differently. So, if there are conversations that can happen around what those were in a safe and not too vulnerable way, but conversations that can happen so you're aware of how to kind of navigate some of those pieces. But then if something does come up, how can we repair that, acknowledge and move forward? So it's time because they have to experience new things. But there can be some active conversations and then the repair piece to help navigate that.
Wonderful. Any other questions before we wrap up? I'm getting a lot of gratitude. There's a lot of people very grateful for your time and perspective, Laura. So thank you for that. Um, but I will say in the meantime, if anyone does have any additional questions, anything, please don't hesitate to reach out. You can certainly reach out to myself. Laura's information is on the screen there. If you reach out to me, I will ensure I'll connect you to Laura or the appropriate resources that you might be looking for. And we certainly invite you to join us for future conversations as well too. So, Laura, thank you very much to you for being here with us today and sharing this perspective. Thank you to you and your team for the work that you're doing in our community to help individuals and teams go through the processes of knowing how to approach these things delicately, but in a way that is impactful. And we look forward to continuing to work with you. And I invite our audience to join us next month. We're going to be having a due diligence health and safety. This is physical health and safety, hosted in partnership with Mazer Safety. So we invite you to join us for that and to learn a little bit more about the 2025 updates. And we look forward to seeing you at our upcoming Business After Fives, all the things. Check out our events calendar for this and more. And we hope that you all have an amazing week ahead, and we will talk to you soon. Thank you.